The Grenlec Debates, powering bright ideas.
You're watching the 10th season of the Grenlec Debates. Please bear in mind that matches, topics, and positions are randomly selected by schools. The theme for the round of 16 is development. I am your chairperson, Eric Williams, and I call this House to order. The motion: be it resolved that unregulated roadside food vending is harmful to the economic development of Grenada. Proposition: Anglican High School. The opposition: Hillsborough Secondary. Please welcome the first speaker for the proposition.
Mr. Chair, judges, opponents, all greetings. Be it resolved that unregulated roadside food vending is harmful to the economic development of Grenada. Merriam-Webster Dictionary defines unregulated as disorderly, chaotic, not controlled by regulation. The Food and Agricultural Organization defines roadside food vending as the selling of a wide range of ready-to-eat foods and beverages sold and sometimes prepared in public places, notably streets. Economic development, according to the World Bank 2007 Development Report, is one that ensures a better quality of life through the indicators such as higher standards of health and nutrition, higher incomes, and better education. Harmful, of a kind, likely to be damaging. I will discuss economic implications of unregulated roadside vending, and my second speaker will present the impact of same. Judges, we are not against food vending, but unregulated roadside food vending, by its very nature, is a double-edged sword to Grenada's economic development. It builds, but to a great extent, it breaks down. We submit that economic development is more than economic growth and the expanding of the gross domestic product, but it is a process of improving the economic and social well-being of people. Judges, regulation exercise control over an activity through the application of rules. It is necessary condition for order to prevail, or chaos will reign. And judges, because the sale of food is a key economic activity with serious implications of the health of this nation, regulation is an imperative. Public health authorities worldwide are seeking to ensure compliance to the hazard analysis and critical control point standard. However, Mr. Andre Worm, Chief Environmental Officer, asserts that most unregulated roadside food vendors deviate from these set standards. Records obtained from the Ministry of Health show that there are only 248 licensed food vendors. However, according to Mr. Worm, there is an estimated 600 unregulated food vendors throughout Grenada. These vendors are not recipients of food handlers training, nor are their facilities reflective of set standards. And in most cases, unsanitary conditions, absence of running waters, and toilet facilities, all of which lead to a greater possibility of foodborne illnesses. So tell me, when potential buyers consume these foods and contract these illnesses, isn't health affected? Isn't productivity affected? Judges, just 3 weeks ago, near 80% of our staff at a banking institution in St. George contracted foodborne illness from food. Guess what? The vendor, unregulated. Dr. Francis Martin, Senior Health Officer, states foodborne illnesses as a result of unregulated roadside food vending represents the biggest threat to primary healthcare in Grenada. Health, judges, is wealth, and any risk associated with the health sector seriously threatens the wealth of the nation. Judges, the growth of our workforce has resulted in a growing demand for food. Facilities such as restaurants employ people and pay taxes. They also carry overheads such as rent and utilities, which is unlike most roadside vendors who can charge lower prices for food because their expenses are much less. This forces the established businesses to shut down, and there is an economic cost to the owners, the employees who suffer job losses, and the farming community who supply farm products to these businesses. The state also loses tax revenue such as corporate income tax and license fees. Further, former Minister of Finance, Senator Nazem Burke, states governments usually acquire information from registered vendors to formulate macroeconomic policies. However, because unregulated food vendors and their business details are not captured, the empirical data is flawed and will not.
The first speaker for the opposition.
Afternoon all. We firmly oppose the motion, be it resolved that unregulated roadside food vending is harmful to the economic development of Grenada. We reject the opponents' definitions and provide our own. Cambridge Dictionary, unregulated, business or activity not directed and controlled by rules or laws. Economic development, the process in which an economy grows or changes and becomes more advanced, especially when both economic and social conditions are improved. Lexicon Webster Dictionary, harmful, capable of causing hurt or damage. The Grenada Food Safety Act, 2015, roadside food vending or street food vending. Producing street food in a temporary structure, vehicle, watercraft, cart, tray, or other similar device. I will show how roadside food vending plays a beneficial role in economic development. Our second speaker will show that it is not unregulated roadside food vending that is harmful to economic development, but rather lack of focus on people. According to Patricia Gopi, 2010, Economics for CSEC text, human well-being must improve for economic development to take place. Honorable Chair, economic development is multidimensional. It includes social and cultural values and even the personal happiness of individuals. Gopi further states, I quote, there must be continuous economic growth, increased real per capita income, for also job creation for economic development to take place. Economic development, in simplest form, is the creation of economic wealth for all citizens for potentially increased quality of life. Unquote. Job creation, economic wealth, increased quality of life. Isn't this a pursuit of all, including roadside food vendors? Proponents, where is the harm in having a safe form of employment to possess these things? To provide finance, put food on the table, send children to school, pay hospital bills. Honorable Chair, according to the United Nations, there are two measures of economic development: the Human Development Index, HPI, and Human Poverty Index, HPI. The HPI measures a country's standard of living, while HDI measures a country's average achievements, life expectancy, educational attainment, and adjusted real income. These measure quality of life, welfare, and the level of development, focusing on the well-being of a country's people. Colin Gilchrist, former consultant, Ministry of Finance, Grenada, in a 2017 article, supports, I quote, people should be the object and subject of development in the growth of any economy, unquote. He warned that if government policies is concentrated on economic growth primarily, it might be done at the expense of economic development. He further states, I quote, what we see happening in Grenada today is that we have economic development, but we don't have jobs, unquote. He coins it jobless growth. Economic development in Grenada today is achieved through foreign rather than local investments. Incidentally, the International Monetary Fund, IMF Country Focus, May 2017, in an article entitled Grenada Sets the Stage for Sustainable Growth, highlights the fact that unemployment in Grenada is very high. According to the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, report 2003 on Caribbean Regional Working Group on Street Food Vendors, I quote, Caribbean governments have recognized that street foods play an important socio-economic role in terms of employment potential, special income for women and men, and in serving the food at prices available to lower and middle income groups, unquote. Street food vending has been ignored as it is part of the informal sector, but this sector absorbs those whom, because of economic changes, social changes, individual characteristics, have difficulty obtaining jobs in the formal sector. Patel et al., 2013. Gainful employment, Honorable Chair. Where is the harm in these proponents? If you ask me, it's doing good. I thank you.
The second speaker for the proposition.
Good afternoon, all. We refute the narrow definitions of the opposition and ask that they present a more holistic consideration of the terms of the motion. Unstructured, not subject to rule, uncontrolled, disorderly, chaotic are all synonymous to unregulated. Judges, a 2014 World Bank article titled Workers in the Informal Economy, explains that a high level of informality in the economy undermines the rule of law and order. The United Nations Human Development Index 2016 report shows a direct correlation between the quality of life of citizens and the economic development of a country. Hence, the fact that many citizens are openly ignoring laws and regulations can negatively impact on our quality of life and consequently is harmful to our economic development. Unregulated roadside food vending takes place in a public space intended to be used by pedestrians in a manner that is safe for all citizens. This practice infringes on the rights of citizenry to use the roadside unimpeded. This creates traffic hazards as pedestrians are often forced to use the road together with oncoming vehicles. Thus, the potential for accidents is increased. In addition, unregulated roadside food vending creates vehicular congestion, which results in loss of time, and loss of time, judges, is loss of productivity. Isn't this harmful to the economic development of Grenada? Section E in the preamble of Grenada's constitution expresses our high regard and respect for the rule of law. Disregard for the rule of law is harmful to the development of our society as a whole, inclusive of economic development implications. Judges, of dire consequences to the economic development of our country is the environmental impact of unregulated roadside food vending. Environmental Officer Mr. Danraj Ramkilawan notes an increase in unregulated roadside food vending and on weekends, during sporting and festive seasons, entertainment events, and on weekends. Hence, he expresses concern for the increase in pollution due to unregulated roadside food vending on Wall Street, for example, as there are improper and inadequate arrangements for waste disposal, the results of which are poorly disposed waste, increase in the presence of rodents, and blocked drains, which can impact on flooding in the Montrouge area, for example. Learned judges, increase in pollution is an increase in environmental costs to negate the harmful effect of same. Isn't this opponents harmful to the economic development of Grenada? Additionally, a 2010 article, Parallel Economy, Street Vendors in Nassau by Gibson, posits that unregulated roadside food vending defaces the aesthetic of Caribbean countries and is a sore sight for tourists. Judges, any harmful effect on tourism is a direct and dreadful blow to Grenada's economic development. According to Mr. Purcell, Senior Planning Officer, unregulated roadside food vending is illegal development. Unregulated roadside food vending is harmful to the economic development of Grenada. Thank you.
The second speaker for the opposition.
Afternoon. We stand by our definition. Harmful is synonymous with catastrophic, destructive, disastrous. Can we really say unregulated food vendors have such an effect on economic development of Grenada? How? When the roles of street food vending and street foods are not clearly defined. The very nature of roadside vending shows that the informal sector is unenumerated by official data collecting agencies, so official statistics on the street food trade in Grenada is virtually non-existent. Honorable Chair, the proponent claims are mere scuttlebutt. Worthy judges, according to FAO, I quote, the street food micro-industries are vital for the economic planning and development of many towns. The contribution of street food vendors to the economies of developing countries have been vastly underestimated and neglected, unquote. However, statistics for some places do exist. Boga, Indonesia annual sales of street food amount to $67 million US. Kohe 1986. In Malaysia, sales $2.2 billion US. Ale 1988, a significant figure considering most of the earnings are generated locally and promote economic self-sufficiency. Proponents, you paint a bleak picture of roadside food vendors and their contributors to economic development. Bias, unfounded, lack of empirical data. Tinker 1988. Seriously speaking, what have the authorities done to ensure the regularization of the vendors? The new Food Safety Act, June 2015, Act number 19, Part 2, Section 7.1 states, I quote, "There is hereby established a body to be called the Food Safety Act, which shall be responsible for implementing and enforcing the provisions of this act," unquote. Proponents, where is this body? Section 7.2 states, I quote, "The authority shall consist of members, all of which shall be appointed by the minister," unquote. Where are these members? It further states in Part 3, Section 11.1, I quote, "No person shall engage in food vending, whether permanently or temporarily, unless the person has a valid permit issued by the authority," unquote. If there is no body, no member, who is issuing this permit? Honorable Chair, diarrhea of words, constipation of actions. Proponent, your ground shaky. Why numbers increasing? 263 in 2002, FAO 2003, 396 in 2016, equivalent to less than 1% of the total employed persons in Grenada. Labor Force 2016. Proponents, are you saying that less than 1% is capable of doing such a catastrophic damage to the economic development of Grenada? And if so, why are they still in existence? Why doesn't the government shut them down, lock them up? Why? Employment is better than unemployment. Income is better than no income. Medium standard of living is better than low standard of living. Truthfully speaking, the government cannot provide for the number of people who are unemployed. Unregulated roadside food vending can in no way be harmful to the economic development of Grenada. We kindly advise on the question of harmful, think again.
The opposition cross-examiner.
Worthy opponent, you stated that unregulated roadside food vending is potentially harmful to the health of the people, putting a strain on the economic development of Grenada. But where is your evidence to establish a direct correlation between the consumption of unregulated street food and any health issues in Grenada?
My first speaker alluded to this when the outbreak of a foodborne illness in the bank caused 80% of the staff to come down with a foodborne illness, causing a decrease in productivity, which affects economic development. So this is a direct relationship.
But what is your source for that, worthy opponent? Is it credible?
We went on the ground, we asked the people who got ill, who they bought it from. It was a roadside vendor. This roadside vendor is unregulated.
Okay. If roadside vending is limiting our economic development, what have we not achieved today that we would have if not for roadside food vending?
Rephrase?
If roadside food vending limits our economic development, what do we have today what do we not have today that we would have had if not for roadside food vending, unregulated?
We are not saying it limits it, we are saying it's harmful to it. It
But
can
how is it
cause harm to economic development.
But how is it harmful when it is providing employment, providing a source of income, allowing people to provide for their families, to provide for themselves? They pay indirect taxes. So how is this harmful? This is beneficial rather than them being unemployed. What do you put?
We are not against vending. We are against unregulated vending, the very vending on the roadside, the place where we have to walk. They can't be vending on the roadside because it's a public place. This is unregulated. This is why we propose that regulations be put in place.
Thank you. A study by IMF on the economy of Grenada says that there are 3 remaining challenges to economic development in Grenada, where high public debt, unemployment, and efforts to revitalize the agricultural sector. Where is unregulated street food vending in this?
Well, the opponent, the motion at hand is unregulated vending, and our research showed that unregulated vending can have an impact on the economic development of Grenada.
But
it poses
what
health
studies prove
threats,
that?
social threats.
Are there any studies that prove that, worthy opponent?
Yes, not studies, but credible sources, people in authority, Minister Oliver Joseph, former Minister of Finance, Mr. Nazim Burke,
But have they weighed the other side, or did you just ask them for your side, worthy opponent?
No.
Worthy opponent, access to education is one of the measures of economic development. How exactly has this been hampered by unregulated roadside food vending? Access to education is a measure under GDI and HDI. So how has this been hampered by unregulated roadside food vending, if you're saying that is harming economic development of Grenada?
We are saying that roadside vending harms the economic development of Grenada, not education.
The proposition cross-examiner.
Your opponent alluded to the earnings that roadside vending creates for different countries. But the same unregulated vending can cause an outbreak of foodborne illness, which takes away from the very revenue it created. Comment.
Worthy opponent, as I said, foodborne illnesses or foodborne diseases can be transmitted in unregulated as well as unregulated food establishments.
But isn't the chance of it being transmitted through regulated much less?
Worthy opponent, but what regulated street food vending is there in Grenada?
This is why we are proposing that regulations be put in place, more effective regulations to ensure that these illnesses do not...
But economic development is the improvement in the standard of living of the people. So
This
by being employed, worthy opponent, are they not improving
It
the
is
standard
not
of living?
only employment, worthy opponent. You're taking a narrow definition of the
Opponent,
term.
but when they're employed, they have a source of income. They pay indirect taxes. They pay value-added taxes when they buy their raw materials. So they do contribute. They are able to better themselves, better their families, to ensure that their standard of living and their family's standard of living is improved with the very definition of economic development.
Opponent, this can all be done through regulations. Permit me to ask my next question. Your speaker asked, where is the harm in this type of vending? But how can this question be posed when roadside vending makes pedestrians have to walk in the road, people late for work, citizens getting food poisoning?
With the opponent, unregulated street food vending is on a small scale in Grenada. As my second speaker said, less than 1% of the labor force in Grenada
This 1% can cause a foodborne illness epidemic,
these are
harming
people,
tourism, our main pillar. This 1% can do a lot.
Worthy opponent, these are people who are trying to make a living, the lower echelons of society. They were not able to get a job in the formal economy. This is why they had to turn to the informal economy.
They can make this living through regulations. We are not against them making money.
But the regulation is not in place, worthy opponent.
This is
I think Masson Coates puts it best. Street food vending is an essential factor in economic growth and development, so you still cannot continue with your stance.
I think we have efficiently talked about this topic. Opponents, unregulated roadside food vending encourages total disregard for the rule of law, in that it infringes on the right of the public to use the roadside uninterrupted for its intended purpose, that is for pedestrian traffic. According to our definition of economic development, this creates harmful social and economic consequences. Please comment.
As I said, for economic development to be harmed, it has to be. This cannot harm economic development. Economic development is multidimensional. There are many measures, and you cannot cannot say that people who are trying to make a living, people who are employed, who are not involved in crime, people who are providing for their families are harming our economic development.
But when these people harm health and tourism, is that not affecting?
But there is no evidence to prove that this is going on with the opponent. You lack the
Are you going to
substantial
wait
evidence.
for tourists to come and eat some food and then give Grenada a bad name?
The opposition rebuttal speaker.
Good afternoon, all. We are resolute in our stance that roadside food vending is not harmful to the economic development of Grenada. Our opponents claim that unregulated roadside food vending promotes serious health issues and deviate standards. There are drawbacks, but as my second speaker has showed, less than 1% of employed persons are roadside food vendors. These people are not going to retard the development of the entire economy of Grenada. Proponents, due to the competition and dependency, they will be forced to ensure high standard to maintain viability and to ensure success among their businesses. Your first speaker also stated that regulated food establishments pay taxes, but unregulated vendors do not. Proponents, these vendors do pay taxes. These taxes are referred to as indirect taxes, such as VAT. Proponents, you make the claim that unregulated roadside food vendors are harmful to Grenada's economic development. As my first speaker clearly stated, economic development is the creation of wealth for all citizens for increased standard of living. Proponents, roadside food vending does just that. Vendors have more disposable income and they are employed. According to my first speaker, Caribbean governments have recognized that street foods play an important socio-economic role in terms of employment potential, special income for women and men, and in serving the food at prices affordable to the lower and to middle income groups. Your second speaker talked about the environment which tourists will have to see, and this damages tourism. However, proponents, roadside vending has been around since our foreparents. Tourists come to our island to experience our authentic culture and tradition, our scrumptious snacks produced by these people. Your second speaker also pointed out the improper disposal of waste, clogging our drains. What do you have to prove that this improper waste disposal is due to the presence of unregulated roadside food vendors, who in fact only make up less than 1% of employed persons? It is safe to say that consumers contribute to this improper disposal rather than the vendors themselves.
The proposition rebuttal speaker.
Good afternoon, all. My opponents have made some erroneous statements which cannot be left to stand. Our opponents have presented a narrow definition of economic development in the moot. Our opponents are taking a narrow definition of economic development. If a practice affects the health, tourism, and productivity of a country, it affects economic development. They also stated that the regulations are deficient. Opponents, we too share the sentiments that there is need for better regulation. And may I inform you that steps are being put in place to correct this, which spells out stronger regulation and structures to ensure compliance. They stated that roadside food vending is part of the informal economy, provides jobs and schools. We are fully aware of and acknowledge the role of roadside food vending. But what we are saying is that when it is unregulated, it leaves room for harm. Harm that can reverse the very gains that it brought in the first place. The speaker stated that roadside food vending builds the economy. But what they fail to realize is that while it strengthens the informal economy, the fact that it hampers revenue collections and the formulation of accurate economic policies means that it paralyzes the general economic development. It builds, but it tears down, and this is harmful. My opponents repeatedly alluded to the 2015 Act, then taking their definition from there. However, they fail to realize that it is not in the practice, it is in principle, according to the former Minister of Finance, Nazim Buck. I thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Please tune in for the rest of Season 10 of the Grenlec Debates and visit us on our Facebook page to vote for your favorite debater.
The Grenlec Debates. Vote for your favorite debater on our Facebook page. The Grenlec Debates. Powering bright ideas.